Welcome to Political Trade Secrets, an inside look at campaigns and politics, where we pull back the curtain, look under the hood, and investigate all aspects of politics and how elections are won. Now, here's your host, Dustin Olson.
Pollster and host of the Political Trade Secrets podcast, Dustin Olson.
Dustin Olson.
Dustin Olson.
And Dustin Olson, pollster at American Polls. They work for both Republicans and Democrats. And he hosts a podcast, Political Trade Secrets. Oh, we love that. We like that podcast.
Now from Washington, D.C. is pollster Dustin Olson.
And welcome to the show. I'm Dustin Olson. Thank you to everybody who's joining us live, or if you're watching later on any one of your favorite podcast platforms, thank you for joining us. What we like to do here is pull back the curtain, look under the hood, and see how politics, the media really works. And we're going to be taking a little bit of a longer view today. I like to, around the holidays, do something around politics or history related to that holiday. So this week we're going to be talking about the surprising history of Thanksgiving and the politics around it. And this is something that wasn't set from the beginning, and there's different traditions that have happened over time. It's become fairly unified, but we're going to be talking about Franksgiving, which is an interesting little history that it didn't really go that well. And we're going to be to talk about this with us. We're going to have J. Mark Powell, author, communications expert, calls himself a historical storyteller, and he's also a syndicated columnist with his column Holy Cow History, and we'll be able to pick his brain as to all this unique history. And so if you like the program, what you really can do to help us, it really does help the program, is to like, follow, and subscribe. That it helps us get our content all over the place, and really does make a difference. So whether it's YouTube, X, Facebook, or your favorite podcast platform like Apple Podcasts or Spotify, please do like, follow, or subscribe. And if you're watching the live stream, you can join us. You can make comments, questions. We can bring you into the show and answer those questions real time. So if you'd like to be able to see our live streams, follow us on those social media platforms so you can get notified when we do go live with our programs. But today in history is also, we have Thanksgiving in a couple of days, but whenever it's around Thanksgiving, I'm always reminded of, the tragedy of the 1960s. We're going into a moment that's fairly similar in many ways with, there was, a slate of assassinations in the 1960s. And today is actually the 62nd anniversary of the farewell, the funeral for JFK. And if you're on any of our social media, you probably saw this tribute earlier today.
Anybody here seen my old friend John? Can you tell me where he's gone? He freed a lot of people, but it seemed the good they die young. I just looked around and he's gone.
That is definitely an iconic moment in our country's history. You saw John there saluting his father. Really, the country did feel that. We've actually tracked this in our own polling. This sense that the violence, most people felt anger in the recent tragic assassination of Charlie Kirk, but there's a lot of people who didn't feel really anything around any of the recent assassinations or the attempts. And I wasn't there for that event, but I do think that the country lost some of its innocence at that time. But we'll ask J. Mark Powell about that and see what his thoughts are on that, then go into the history, a little bit more about who he is. I first met him right after he had left CNN. He had worked there for a number of years, has been a journalist, anchor, reporter across the country in television media and in print, and is now a syndicated columnist as well as an editor, and obviously an author on a number of books. We'll ask him about his other books as well. But I believe Curse of Cain and now this new book, Witness to War. Fascinating idea for a book. And anyway, without further ado, I'm going to bring in our guest, J. Mark Powell. Mark, it's great to have you. Thank you for taking the time to shed some light. Anybody who knows Mark Powell knows that you can just drop a quarter in. He can go for forever on any topic within history. So I thought you're the best person to invite to talk about Thanksgiving. But, today is a historic day, 62 years since the funeral for JFK. And, any thoughts that you have about that?
Yeah, Dustin, not only was the funeral 62 years ago today, but you played that memorable moment from the entire services where John Kennedy Jr. salutes his father's caskets. It was just gut-wrenching to see this child at that age realize that was his third. He was born 65 years ago today. So he's doing that on what should have been a child's, fun third birthday. That tells you how much time has passed. He would have been 65. And then his sister Caroline, standing, we saw in that picture too, she turned 7 2 later.
Wow.
So this was a tough week for them when they should have been celebrating kids' birthday, burying their father and husband.
So I mentioned at least a couple of your books, but why don't you tell everyone a little bit about your background as an author and as a writer. Syndicated column is Holy Cow History. And just tell us a little bit about that.
Well, I got into news because I've always loved the social studies in the broad sense of the word: history, politics, government, geography, the whole shooting match. I've always loved to write. And so that was a natural into journalism. It thrilled me that I could be up close to major political figures and get paid for it. No one ever told me you just didn't get paid a lot. But I had a 25-year run and really enjoyed that, and had a front row seat to history as it unfolded. Along the way, I co-authored a novel, The Curse of Cain, which is a historical thriller set around Lincoln's assassination in 1865. And then I published a political thriller in 2013, Tell It Like Tupper. The most recent project, The Witness to War, is truly a labor of love. I've been on and off for 5 years. And one day in 2014, I had to go to the post office to pick up a new letter that I just acquired that had been delivered there. And as I was driving home, it occurred to me the content of this newest letter connected directly with the content in another letter I already had. Wow. And driving, the idea popped in my head: what if I curated a collection where you could tell the entire story of the war from Lincoln's election in 1860 until when the guys came home in the summer of 1865 in real time as it's happening, through the eyes and the words of the people who resulted then in Witness to War, as 132 witnesses, one amazing story. There are no memoirs, no recollections later in life. It's all in the moment accounts. It's told with a balance and an objectivity that's largely lacking today. This is not a pro-Southern book. It's not a pro-Northern book. It's a general American book. Let them tell you in their own words as it was happening, how it felt. There's gut-wrenching moments. There's some little humor. And just some remarkable experiences. For instance, one begs her husband to desert and come home. And when she begs him, she tells him she's put a lot of thought into this. There's another just chillingly realistic passage where a woman is writing to her sister, and their brother had been killed at Fort Donelson, and her husband had to go down and exhume the body back for reburial in the family plot. And she goes into all kinds of, it's just a stark realization of what the reality of that experience really was like. Yeah. It's not like the pretty little image you see on the cover. Yeah. And there's some funny stuff too. There's an account of a Union soldier. They had a big snowfall in Northern Virginia. So his colonel got the whole regiment out, 800 men, divided them in half. One side built a fort, the other, and then they all rode snowboard afternoon. They had a snowball battle. It was the biggest snowball fight I ever saw. I got out with just one black eye and was lucky to just have that. So there's it's
Who
really
knows, it
the
might be
whole
on the
experience, not just
Guinness Book of World Records for largest snow battle.
There you go. But,
I just want to make sure that people know they can pre-order now on Amazon. It's going to be released on February 3rd. And the old trick, you're just starting to do the promotion for the book, is you have to say the name Witness to War over and over again. Make sure people hear that, and they can go to Amazon to moving on. I'd like to get into this topic.
Yes, and let me squeeze in real quick. These are, before we move on, these are totally brand new to the public letters. They've never been published before. So these are not the same stories you're going to be reading over and over. They're totally brand new.
Well, you've curated these letters for a very long time. You've collected them, and this is what you've done. I mean, this is a life's work, as I understand it.
560 letters. I always joke with my friends, it would have been cheaper if I'd become a crack cocaine addict instead of a Civil War letters addict.
That's funny. All right, so let's talk about the surprising history and politics of Thanksgiving. And the first place to start is actually the first Thanksgiving. What was actually going on? What we learned about it in school, but what was really going on back then, and how did this get started? So let's start there, and then we're going to go into how it evolved. And one of the most interesting episodes, I think, with Franksgiving.
Yeah, it's really an interesting story. The Pilgrims, as we all know, land at Plymouth, near Plymouth, Massachusetts, in 1620, and start a colony. And it was a very hard first year. It was very, very hard. England is no stranger from which they came. Is no stranger to cold winters, but that was a particularly brutal winter. And remember, this is before antibiotics. This is before antivirals. So then new continent, and there are viruses and germs and bacteria their bodies have never been exposed to. So there's no built-up resistance. There's no wonder drugs to help them, and a good percentage of them die from illness. And it's a tough winter. They came very, very close to starving to death. As a matter of fact, the Wampanoags, the local Native American tribe, really helped them out and saved them. So the fact that they made it in 1621, that they just survived, that was worthy of celebration. So they decided to have a 3-day feast, festival, ceremony, celebration to give thanks and just have fun after going through a miserable experience. We don't know exactly when it was held, but the best modern research suggests it was sometime between September 11th, so it wouldn't have been this late in the year. There's only one witness account. There's a lot of recollections, there's not a lot to go on. But it was a 3-day festival outside, and we'll start off right at the bat with a common misconception that the Pilgrims had invited the Native American Indians to come join them at the festivities. And what happened was they had a lot of events. They had a lot of athletics competitions, races, and since they were all there, they did military drill. All the men in the colony had to serve in the military, and they were practicing their guns and firing. And the Indians heard them and said, "Hey, wait a minute, what's going on?" So Massasoit, the chief, rounded up about 90 braves and showed up. He was fearing there might be trouble, and so the Pilgrims joined in. But a lot of people think they were invited beforehand. It didn't turn out that way. We do know that some of the braves went back to their village and returned with venison. The one thing the Pilgrims did not have the first Thanksgiving was the overwhelming majority of Americans are going to have on Thursday: turkey, because turkey wasn't native to that part of Massachusetts. There was
what was on the menu?
Probably wild fowl, probably geese and duck, shellfish, eels, squash, corn or maize as they called it. But there was no pumpkin pie. There were no rolls. There was a green bean casserole. Certainly no mashed potatoes and gravy that we have today. One thing they did have, the beer. There was a lot of beer on the Mayflower because water could go bad, but the fermentation kept beer cleaner or safer to drink for a lot longer. We know they were running low on, the Mayflower was running low on beer when they arrived. So they would have produced beer. Again, as you know, if you're a traveler to different parts of the world and you have the water and your body's not accustomed to it, it can cause serious intestinal. Montezuma's Revenge is one of the best examples. So they were fermenting it to make it drinkable. Probably it wasn't the beer we know today because they didn't have barley at that time. It was probably a corn beer, close beer or near beer, and they would have had a lot of that for 3 days too.
Which as the cousins to the Puritans, right? They're basically that kind of a view of the world. It might be surprising to people that they were drinking alcohol. So
misconception, Dustin, is people think it became an annual tradition. Not so. There wasn't a Thanksgiving in 22 the next year. In 1623, Governor Bradford of the Massachusetts colony declares another one, but then it's held very sporadically, on and off for the next 150 years until after the Revolution. When it is held, local leaders, mayors, and even church leaders would declare a Thanksgiving on their own. And what really puts Thanksgiving
was there
on the
a reason
map
for that? Like, was there? Would it be after like a big harvest? Was it because there's something, or they needed to? They didn't have polling back then, but they knew
there was something to be thankful for. Yeah, there was something that was a result of something. They had survived. They had survived a pestilence and illness, or the crops were good after a really bad season, or coming through a battle in the Revolutionary War. There usually was some sort of reason for it, not just to be thankful for thankful sake. But what really puts Thanksgiving as we know it on the map, the traditional, the first Thanksgiving, quote, end quote. There's a book published in 1841 that mentioned a footnote. And everybody in New England took that footnote. They forgot the rest of the book and just ran with it. And somehow the idea took hold and spread. Hey, we need to do this to commemorate our heritage, because by then, it had been more than 200 years. And everyone kind of likes the idea of, hey, it's November, the crops are relaxed. Remember, we're still largely an agricultural-based society. We're just at the start of the Industrial Revolution. So that was a slower time of the year when there was less work to do. And the different migratory patterns are taking shape around the country. People from the Northeast typically are going through Pennsylvania and then across to the upper Midwest. So there's a new tradition of commemorating the 1621 Thanksgiving with them. And interestingly, in those antebellum days, what was most frequently eaten was chicken pie. That was the entree, not roast turkey like we know today. Now, when I say chicken pie, listen very carefully. It wasn't chicken pot pie like we know in the frozen food sections today. Similar, but not exactly the same. Basically, they would get a hen or a young chicken. They would broil it in water to make the bones pliant. Yeah, they would stuff the chicken inside. They would often use parsley to season it. It wasn't pot pie like we had today, where it was creamy with vegetables like peas, carrots, and potatoes. They would put in flour and parsley, and some areas had regional variations where they'd put in Madeira port wine, and then they'd put a double crust on top and bake it. So it had a total different taste than today's pot pie, but that was considered a huge special treat, say for Thanksgiving or wedding receptions or birthdays. Later on, as farming develops, they say, hey, wait a minute, a whole lot more people with one turkey. It tastes better, and it's a lot less effort to cook. So chicken pie gradually faded, and turkey took over as the entree, as the best dish.
And who are the ones who decided that? Like, who actually made that happen?
Popular demand, just people with time. Somebody tries a turkey, and the guests go, oh, I like that. I'll do that for my Thanksgiving next year. That's how it kind of took form.
I'm going to just take a moment to say, if you like the show, if you like this kind of content, you can follow us anytime on YouTube, X, Facebook, or your favorite podcast platforms. I like Apple, Spotify. You might like or I like Apple Podcasts. You might like Spotify, but wherever it is, it does help the show to check us out there and do that. So just like most things in America, there's a political background to pretty much everything, and the Civil War was a time when there was politics associated with the holidays. We had Christmas, we had Thanksgiving, and Abraham Lincoln famously is the one who did the Thanksgiving proclamation. So talk a little bit about that, because it was different as to the South and to the North as to what holidays were prominent and whatnot. So talk a little bit about that political background.
Yeah, politics does enter into the history of Thanksgiving because, first of all, until the early 20th century, Thanksgiving was largely viewed as a northern holiday. It had started in New England, and the South viewed it, and not just from a Southern perspective, not just New England, but the Yankeeist of all Yankee New England, Massachusetts. So they didn't feel a part and parcel to that. By the way, incidentally, Jamestown, the first permanent English settlement in America, Jamestown in 1607, 13 years before the Pilgrims, they had Thanksgiving celebration in 1619, 2 years before Massachusetts. So Jamestown likes to say we really had the first Thanksgiving. And in 1963, President John F. Kennedy issued a proclamation. Now, it had already been established as a federal holiday at that point, but every president still issues a proclamation. President Trump has, and proclaiming a Thanksgiving holiday. And Kennedy goes out of his way. He's sidestepping the controversy, and he says, in Plymouth, Massachusetts, and Jamestown, Virginia. So he's not going to get any part of that. But anyway, in 1862, Lincoln had issued a proclamation for something very similar to giving, but he didn't use that word and that terminology. In October 1863, then he issues a famous proclamation declaring the last Thursday in October specifically to be thankful. He does that for several reasons. The North has won 2 victories, and the turning point of the war had come that summer, Gettysburg and Vicksburg, Mississippi, but the war was far from over. There was also a rising Copperhead or pro-Southern element within the North, and Lincoln's looking to unify the South. So he picks the last Thursday that the whole country is going to observe, call a holiday. By the way, the fact that the Lincoln putting his arm around Thanksgiving and endorsing it was another strike in Southern eyes for half a century after the war.
That's why he included the proclamation or what have you for Christmas, though, too, because that was more of a Southern holiday. Is that right?
But it's interesting to note, though, even though he specifically for the first time says the last Thursday in November, people are still celebrating it on different days, different Thursdays. And in Witness to War, the book we mentioned earlier, I have a passage from a war widow, a young woman named Louise Howe, who's writing from Guilford, Vermont, to her a relative in Massachusetts. She writes on December 21, 1862, "You remember our Thanksgiving was not until a week after yours. Spent that day and the next 10 days with my dear husband's family." So even then there was variation to when it was observed.
Yeah.
But
well, I mean, even
October,
to this day, Thanksgiving is celebrated at a different time in Canada than it is in the United States.
Right. It's in October in Canada. So October 3rd, 1863, Lincoln's proclamation is considered the birth of the modern Thanksgiving celebration that we know today.
Yeah. That's interesting. And obviously you get into we have it at different times in the country, and that doesn't get resolved for a while. So maybe we fast forward a little bit. Is there anything else between then and then when we fast forward to Franksgiving and all that?
Just one thing, World War I, believe it or not, plays a big role in helping solidify Thanksgiving as a national holiday. People don't tend to realize today, World War I was a milestone in the reconciliation between the North and South. after the Civil War. Feelings had lingered for a long time, and everybody came together, and they intentionally made a public show of burying the hatchet and hard feelings. The United Confederate Veterans was much like the American Legion or the VFW. There was a group called the Grand Army of the Republic for Union Veterans, and then the UCV, the United Confederate Veterans, the Confederate counterpart of that. And in 1917, right after America entered World War I, show of holding their national convention in Washington, D.C., called outside of the South to show. So a lot of these Southern guys who are now in the United States Army are serving in the Northeast at bases there, and they are serving in Europe and in France alongside soldiers who are from northern states. And so they're getting exposed to Thanksgiving for the first time. And they're saying, hey, this opportunity to pig out the last of November is pretty good. So they bring that home with them and encourage the wives and sisters to observe it. And it really picks up speed and becomes kind of a national holiday then, which brings us up to
before you go into the next thing,
just fun.
Yeah. Before you go into the next thing, so we have quite a few people who are following us across all the different platforms right now live. Wherever you're watching, you can post a comment or question. So if you have a question or comment about Thanksgiving, if you'd like to ask Mark while he's here a question about something in history related to this, or any other holiday, frankly, please do post a comment or question, and if the team can make sure we get those in here, we appreciate that so that we can include you in the conversation. But okay, so we just went through World War I, and that this has been reconciliation, and Southerners started to celebrate Thanksgiving more, and we've now completed World War I. So we're still celebrating at different times, depending on where you live.
But those times were pretty much based around the presidential proclamation. That's pretty much whatever the president proclaimed to be Thanksgiving. They largely stuck to that with some variation. And since Lincoln had proclaimed, politics and government go on precedent very often, and because Lincoln had proclaimed the last Thursday in November, most presidents stuck with that. So the 1930s rolls around, and as you know, it was the greatest financial crisis, economic crisis in American history, the Great Depression. It's extremely difficult to know just how memorable that experience was for those of us today who've grown up in prosperity all our lives. Mm-hmm. Stock market crashes 31, and then business fail, and then unemployment just shoots up, and it's just awful. 31, 32, 33, 34, that's the depths of it. So by 1938, the country is clawing its way out, but it's far from totally over. Also, recovery varied a lot. The economy was much more regionally based at that time than nationally today. How you recovered depended a lot in what part of the country where you league.
Yeah, my family were in the Dust Bowl states.
There,
my family were in the Dust Bowl states, and that was they thought it was bad before and bad after, so they didn't really notice.
Yeah, so it didn't just magically go away. It was, and World War II is what finally, prosperity in the war boom years is what finally put the end of it. But in 1938. Business retailers looked at the calendar, and you got to understand something it was considered very bad taste to do anything for Christmas before Thanksgiving point. And even then as now, retailers depended on the Thanksgiving season. That was the biggie. And it really wasn't until the 70s that people, even in my child guide, but even in the 60s and 70s, it was really frowned upon to do things before Thanksgiving. Well, they look at the calendar, and the last Thursday in November is November 30th that year. And so they go to FDR in advance and say, "Can you help us out? Can you move up Thanksgiving to the third Thursday and give us an extra shopping week?" And FDR wanting to help the recovery. Sure, no problem. Boy, howdy. So he's declaring Thursday, November 23rd, Thanksgiving. Now, you got to remember, we forget today, FDR was a very divisive figure in his time. He had a lot of popular support. Obviously, if you're elected president 4 times, you've got popular support.
Yep.
But they weren't 4 landslides.
No.
There was active, particularly Republicans who opposed pretty much anything that Roosevelt did, just because Roosevelt did it, just howled. I mean, they just went apoplectic. Alf Landon, who had been the governor of Kansas, who had been Roosevelt's Republican opponent in 1936, said, "He's acting capriciously like an omnipotent Hitler by changing the name." Now, believe it, he's comparing FDR to Hitler simply for moving Thanksgiving Day. Okay?
Yeah.
So
sounds like a modern
everybody
Democrat.
Everybody doesn't know what to do. So finally, now remember, there's 48 states at this point. 23 states celebrated the state acknowledged Thanksgiving as November 20th. 22 states celebrated our 30th, and 3 states, including your native state of Colorado, Texas, Mississippi, and Colorado, both. And essentially we're left to pick their own Thanksgiving. And then as now people traveled. Families tended to be closer, live closer together, but there still was holiday travel. Then is now games, big football games held on Thanksgiving. Well, if you're dealing with playing a team out of sport, which Thanksgiving do you want? It's a huge headache. And mayor of Atlantic City, New Jersey, was talking to reporters about it, and he said it's not Thanksgiving, it's Franksgiving, after Franklin Delano Roosevelt. So that nickname suddenly, so they called it the 23rd became Franksgiving, and that 23 and 22 state splits were very closely along blue state and red state lines. Democrats went with FDR, and Republicans went with the other. It became just a mess.
It's just like today, though. I mean, the big concern was for that commercial activity to be able to save the economy or save the year, right? That's the driving factor for all this.
Right. And I mean, it was so big. The Three Stooges released a movie called "No Census, No Feeling," because the 1940 census was up, right? And Curly refers to the 4th of July being in October. And Moe says, "What are you talking about? The 4th of July is in July." And Curly says, "You never can tell. Look what they did to Thanksgiving." So, I mean, their editorial cartoons and radio, radio was the big thing before TV, and comedians had a field day joking about Frank. Huge. It became a colossal pain in the neck for F. And finally, it went to Congress, and in 1940, Congress voted and declared that the official federal holiday would be the 4th Thursday in Thanksgiving, starting in 1941. Interestingly, to close this chapter out, in 1942, the U.S. Commerce Department did a study and found that moving it up hadn't done anything for the economy at all. It was a big pain in the neck. That was a good idea, looked good on paper, but it didn't really produce anything. But
it's still to this day, it's
some of the background of Thanksgiving.
So there's later on in the 50s or 60s, they have the Holiday Standardization Act, which that handled all the other holidays, but Thanksgiving had already been handled. So,
well, finally in 1968, they did one act that really streamlined everything and moved things to like Monday. Memorial Day was another one that everybody picked their own day in April for Memorial Day. And so they finally streamlined and came up with the holidays. There are 11 federal holidays today, and it came up with the dates we know and observe today.
So we have, this is something I didn't realize, but based on how you were describing that, it's always been a Thanksgiving proclamation. So I think it's actually today that I think the turkeys got to Washington, D.C. last night, Monday night. And then today, and they famously stay at the Willard Hotel, which is right down the road from the White House. It's not even down the road. It's, less than a block away. And they get like the presidential suite to stay in. I don't think I would want to stay there right after the turkeys, because I'm sure it doesn't smell great. But they have the proclamation. So he does he pardons them and all that. But this whole So they still have the Thanksgiving proclamation. So this is all a tradition all the way back to Abraham Lincoln that they've continued, even though it all
Right.
got codified into law back in 1942.
And I believe, don't quote me, but I most major federal holidays, the president issues a proclamation during the holiday, which is already set by law. It's just tradition.
Yeah, it's something to get a little bit of press. So we got a couple questions here. Tom says, when did football become a part of Thanksgiving tradition?
Starts catching on nationally, and I'm talking because that's where it got big. College football really starts getting big in the late 1880s, explodes in the 1890s, and in the 1890s, early aughts or early O's, we have a lot of the college riot today start. So a lot of that traces its genesis back to that era.
And specifically, those games starting to happen around when Thanksgiving traditionally happens.
Mm-hmm. That's just the end of the playing season. It's a national finale. It's a good time to wrap it up.
Yeah, it makes sense. And then we have another question from another viewer. Prior to 1938, did celebrating Thanksgiving also revolve around the conclusion of harvest?
Well, harvest, remember, depends on where you live, because we're a huge country and the climate's different, and there are climate regions. So if you're in the deep, that's just wrapped up. If you're in the extreme northeast, it's been over for a while. But yeah, typically there have been Thanksgivings or celebrations going back for 1,000 years throughout, often revolving around the end of the harvest season, if it's a good bountiful harvest. So that's a factor in it too. Absolutely.
Well, my hometown, it ended sometime in the early 90s, I think, but we used to always have a harvest festival towards the end of the harvest time frame. I think that's a pretty common thing throughout the country. And it makes me wonder, since Canada has theirs in October, they're also much further north, and their growing season gets done earlier. Is that partly why they're October, other than just being Canadian and being different?
I think that's obviously a key factor. I think another factor is Canada wants to make sure that it doesn't. I mean, it always has. It's trapped in our shadow. We're the big brother, the big neighbor down the street, and kind of want to do their own thing and not look too much like us, but yet they want to be like us. That you always hear about Canada, a nation in its own identity. They don't want to be identified with England. They don't want to be identified with France. They definitely don't want to be identified with us. So they always try to be Canadian, but it always seems like it's watered down for someone else.
Yeah.
By the way, I hope I don't come off sounding anti-Canadian. My great college love affair was with a Canadian, so I have a great soft spot for Canadians in my heart.
Oh, very good. All right, so I want to go back to your books and your in your column and the work that you're doing now. So, if people want to get the book, anything else you want to say about the new book? It's coming out in February 3rd, I believe. Is that right?
If you hated history in school, I don't blame you. In school, a lot of times for many years, it was just names, dates of dead people that had no relevance or no meaning. So that's not what this book is. This essentially is designed for a person who wants to know about history but doesn't like history. And many people who've read it are telling me it's a very fast, quick read, and it was written that way intentionally because trying to cover the entire war in one book is as I found, I learned the hard way. That's a mighty tall order. And again, make sure my goal in writing this was to make anyone look good or bad one side or bad the other. My goal was to hold a mirror up to the people of the period and let them reflect themselves in their own. Remember, they never knew that people were going to be reading these letters. So they pour out their hearts, their hopes, their fears, their goals, their arrogance, their timid, everything. And they pour it out in real time. Another thing, too, when we say letters, there are mentions of Civil War letters, many books based on elections of Civil War letters. Print the entire letter, right? Well, okay, most letters, if I were to write you a letter, hey, Dustin, how's Caroline? How's your daughter? How's the weather there? What's going on? Have you talked to Sean or Thomas lately? Blah, blah, blah. Yeah, blah, blah, blah. Oh, I had a pain in my back, da, 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 da. Oh, we fought a big battle, da, 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 da. Okay. Well, that part of big battle is what we want to know about, or something significant and revealing to the excerpt. It scrapes away all that extraneous stuff, so you don't have a letter. Sometimes it is just a paragraph, a single paragraph. Sometimes there's a remarkable letter written from a woman who was trapped in the town of Gettysburg. And if you know the Battle of Gettysburg, it's one of the rare instances where there was urban fighting. The battle literally swept through the town, and then she was essentially behind. And she writes a compelling account. Days were like there. So that gets several pages. Also, I'd like to point out there are no letters from famous people in this book. There are no generals. There are no presidents. There's no nobody. Intentionally, because their letters, their thoughts have been out there for well over a century and a half. Yep. This is what it was like for the average day real person, everyday person. People in the border states who went both ways, children, a couple of Native Americans. There are actually from 2 slaves. And that's significant. By most state laws in the South, slaves were taught. So just finding anything written by them contemporaneously is like an angel sighting there. But this book, like Prego Spaghetti Sauce, it's all in there.
Wonderful. Well, that's the name of the book, Witness to War, the story of the Civil War told by those who lived it. And I love that you're giving everyday people a voice. That's one of the reasons why at American Pulse, we do the surveys that we do. And we feel very strongly that we are able to give voice to the American public, just regular folks. And whenever our polls are used for the public consumption, used in the news media, that we're able to add the voices of regular Americans to big national topics so that they actually get to have a voice as opposed to just the talking heads. And whenever I do media and whatnot, I'm very conscious that that's something I can provide, is that ability to give regular people a voice in that conversation. So this is what you've done. There wasn't polling back in Civil War, but you've been able to do that, give regular people voice, which I think is pretty amazing. And if people want to get your syndicated column, where should they do that?
The quickest way is to go to journal.com, letter D, letter C, no periods, no nothing, just dcjournal.com. It's published there every week. Matter of fact, it's the day it's posted. There'll be a new one coming up this Friday.
Excellent.
And it's sent to about 300 newspapers around the country.
Wonderful. Well, thank you for sharing that with us. People can pre-order the book Witness to War on Amazon, and as I understand, with authors, getting those pre-orders is a big deal, and it looks like it's going really well. So people are excited about the book, and you've done a lot of really good work, and this one seems like a culmination of a lot of work as an author, both in fiction and nonfiction, and adding to, really, this is, while I know you won't call it scholarly work, this really is, I think, going to add to the entirety of the works out there on the Civil War, because, as you said, these are things that didn't exist. These people's voices haven't been heard before on this topic. So I think it's a real testimony to the work that you've done, and a feather in your cap. So congratulations on the book. I can't wait to read it. I assume I'm going to get an early copy at some point. So hopefully that's the case, and we'll get to learn about this from your great work. Thank you, Mark. Thank you for taking the time, and I hope you have a great Thanksgiving.
And thank you, Dustin.
All right, that was author J. Mark Powell. Thank you very much to him for joining us today and sharing his insights on Thanksgiving. Hopefully, you found it interesting learning about Franksgiving and Franklin Delano Roosevelt almost ruining Thanksgiving for everybody. I, in particular, had not heard about the Three Stooges story. I thought that was fascinating that they made commentary on that little episode. So anyway, thank you very much, and do go pre-order his book on Amazon. I think it's a great way to help good people do work. And if you want to help us do our work here at Political Trade Secrets, where we pull back the curtain on how politics really works, you can follow or subscribe wherever you enjoy your podcasts. Also, if you want to go to my X account, you can subscribe there, follow and subscribe. I put extra content out for people who are subscribers to my X account. That's another way that you can help out. But thank you very much. I hope everyone has a wonderful Thanksgiving, time with your family and friends, and a moment to reflect on the wonderful country that we live in and the opportunities that we each have in this country, and that it's a wonderful day and a time of fellowship for you and your family. With that, thank you very much, and we'll see you on the next Political Trade Secrets.
Join us next time by subscribing on iTunes and get show notes and sign up for our newsletter at politicaltradesecrets.com.